like to walk along the beach. We both adore it so much, and after all, it brings back memories of the days when we were courting and we went along the San Clemente beach.
Well, I've often said to young candidates for the House and the Senate, they always ask my advice as to how to win. I can tell them either way, you've got to win or lose, because I've been through both. But I say that first pick the right wife, because the wife as a partner in a campaign is an enormous asset. Doesn't make as much news, and she must recognize that the husband is going to make the news, generally speaking. But the wife has an enormous impact in bringing the man, the candidacy to people that the candidate is unable to reach.
I'd like to ask you if you really like being First Lady. Do you feel that there are things you can do that compensate for giving up the privacy that you love so much?
I think you just put it right in my words, because everything you said is true. I, in the first place, feel that Dick is doing a magnificent job, and I'm happy about that. Apart from his work, I also have more opportunity to do the things in which I'm interested, to help people, to visit with them, to travel, to report to my husband, and to make recommendations.
ABC News presents A Visit with the First Lady. Mrs. Richard Nixon talks with ABC News correspondent Virginia Sherwood at the Nixon home in San Clemente, California, and in Washington at the White House.
I think that we have dinner more often here, unofficially, than ever before. And we've even gone out on the Truman balcony and enjoyed that. But I must say that a little fresh breeze in the evening is mighty nice. I think our favorite room upstairs is the Lincoln sitting room. It is the smallest room in the house, but it's so cozy with a fireplace and music that we often go down there, sit by the fire, and chat at the end of a long day.
Relaxing with the president by that fireplace he loves, winter and summer, is an important part of Pat Nixon's life. But so is the time she spends at her desk, just off the First Lady's bedroom. There she plans trips and personally signs all of her own correspondence and reviews the hundreds of details of running and caring for the White House. For our initial visit with her, Mrs. Nixon chose one of the public rooms on the ground floor, the Vermeil room, where she has also added her decorator touch. We began by talking of the ways in which she helps the president.
Well, we've always been a team, and I've helped him in many ways. For example, when he was a senator, and also a member of Congress, I would go down on certain days when the mail was particularly heavy and help handle it. And then in New York, I helped with the extracurricular activities, as we called it. He was in law then, but having been vice president, he still received a great deal of mail and many requests to speak. So I took great delight in that, and I was the biggest volunteer in this huge office building. In fact, I was seated in a small office with Rosemary Woods, the secretary, and so I sort of hid behind the door when some important client came in, because I didn't dare let them know I was slaving away.
In your political life, was there any experience that you feel was the most unpleasant? There were some losses, but is there a particular time that you felt the most sorrow or the most hurt or whatever comes in a political campaign when your husband, of course, is the man who's running?
Well, I think that campaigns are always hard to lose for anybody, but in every campaign, there's a winner and there's a loser. And before you ever get into political life, you have to understand this. Also, I have a practice, which I've had all my life, of picking up the pieces fast and just getting busy in something else. And I think this can help a great deal, too.
I remember seeing on television in 1960, and I know that it was it must have been a shattering experience for you, because you were very brave, but there were tears, as there would be, I think, with any wife who loved her husband, any woman who had worked that hard campaigning. Did you, at that time, feel that Mr. Nixon perhaps should get out of politics, or were you ready to get back in?
I thought the decision had to be his. But knowing him, I was positive he would be back in. And during the years, when he wasn't running, he always helped other people campaign. So he really has never been out of politics.
You share this house we talked about with 1.5 million visitors. There were certain areas of the White House that got some wear and tear, I suppose, with families living here with children and their friends and dogs and so on. Mm-hmm. And you started doing some rooms over. What are some of the ones that you've done?
We've done 5 rooms on this floor. They hadn't been painted or refurbished in any way for over 10 years. We thought it was about time. However, I must make a point of saying that our dogs don't get in the White House. We're protecting it for people.
Of these rooms that you've redone, one of my favorites, I wonder if it's yours, is the Vermeer room. Could you tell me a little bit about that room?
Yes, it's one of my favorites, too. It was painted originally in a very dark blue, and the room seems small. We now have it what I call spring green. You can't buy this color because we mixed it. But anyway, it brings the outdoors in here, and it's a happy color at any season of the year. It also complements the beautiful Vermeer collection given by Mrs. Biddle. Mrs. Biddle was a dear friend of Mrs. Eisenhower and vice versa, and that's why the White House was chosen to receive this.
It's solid silver, then with the gold laid over it. And then did you choose, for instance, fabrics that would go into the drapes and choose the chandeliers, and really you were the decorator for this room?
I certainly approved of everything. I didn't find all the beautiful fixtures that we have here and the additions. For example, Mr. Clem Conger, who's the curator of the White House, found this lovely chandelier. It was hand-cut in England in 1795. Then we were able to find the sconces, which match.
There is, I think, a very lovely Monet which hangs over the fireplace, and sometimes people choose one thing and decorate around it, or they find that that one thing goes beautifully in that room. Which happened first in this case?
We thought the Monet would go beautifully here after the room was painted.
Are you a Monet lover? Do you like this particular kind of art and the impressionistic style?
Yes, I do. Renoir as well.
Is there a first lady that you remember and kind of smile at her antics or whatever she did in the White House?
Dolly Madison always intrigued me. She was quite a hostess, and I have read many biographies on her. And apparently she was quite a character with her turbans and her high sense of style. However, the one that I love the most is Mrs. Eisenhower, because during the presidential years, I knew her very well, and I admired her courage in helping her husband become one of the giants of our times.
Do you remember the first time you ever came to the White House before you were the vice president's wife, before you were the first lady?
Yes, I remember I was working in New York as an X-ray technician. This was before I finished college because I did not have the money to go on, and I had to earn my expenses. So I had the great pleasure of coming to Washington and visiting the White House. It was a highlight for me.
Did you ever think at that time that someday you would be the lady of the house?
No, I certainly never did. And I don't know any mother who holds up a young daughter and says she may be first lady someday. They hold up the young men who may be president, but not the daughters.
And you are the official hostess. Do you ever find these duties difficult? Do you find that they're easy for you?
I don't find them difficult because I enjoy people so very much. And it's always a pleasure to plan for them, enjoy them while they're here. And I've had so much experience in this field that it wasn't a big chore for me when I came here.
When you're getting ready for a special occasion, what are the things that the First Lady has to do? Does she oversee, for instance, what will be at the state dinner that evening? Does she choose the floral design that will be in the room?
Yes, that is true. With most First Ladies, I'm sure, because women have an eye for beauty, and they like to choose a color scheme for an evening, perhaps, or the floral arrangements. And certainly, a state dinner is more than just saying on such and such a night, a leader from this country is coming, because you have to study the whole background and history of these people so that you know what they enjoy, what type of music, what type of food, what state gift that they would enjoy having, and also about the country so that you don't speak on subjects in which you are not an expert.
Do you remember any special, particularly exciting one for you or pleasurable?
They're all very exciting, I must say, and I couldn't name just one. You know, I have to be very political, too.
Do you keep a journal of everything that happens?
I don't keep a journal, but I have always made a practice of making shorthand notes on my schedule, which means that at any time I can reconstruct a conversation or in an event. My husband, who is quite a historian, had always asked if I would do that because he said that it isn't easy to recall later the exact wording of a conversation. Consequently, the girls and I both do that.
And I'd like to talk for a moment about a recent history-making event, and a very happy one, I think, for you, because millions across the country saw a very happy, radiant Mrs. Nixon. Her daughter, Tricia, was being married in the Rose Garden. Were you happy about her choice of place?
I don't think Tricia chose that place for history. She just happened to like it, and it was beautiful. I think the few drops of rain made it even more dewy and romantic.
There was television history made that night. We saw the President of the United States dancing. And I remember he told us that he wasn't sure how he'd be there. He wasn't much of a dancer.
No, Dick is a wonderful dancer. In fact, he's my favorite partner. Through many years, we did a great deal of dancing, but now he's just too busy to stay downstairs late, and feels that he must come up and get the latest papers on affairs of state. Consequently, I have to dance by myself in the hall because we still can hear the music.
You can hear the music and
we can hear the music and calling the cars until the last one has picked up the guest.
Does that kind of spoil your concentration as you sit there at your desk?
No, I often peek out to see who's getting in what car and who's going away with another one.
How does it seem in the White House? You had two girls here for a while, and then, of course, you gained one son first, David. Is David a member of the family? Is he part of the Nixon family?
Oh, indeed he is. In fact, night before last, Dick phoned him. He wasn't home, but anyway, Dick did try. And he was going to discuss baseball with him because Killebrew, a great favorite of Dick's, had done real well that day. I didn't follow it, but anyway, Dick said, I've got to call David.
Are you ever a football widow, as many women complain, like in certain times of the year, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday night, it's nothing but professional football?
I usually watch one game during the weekend, and then that's it for me. However, at one time, I followed teams, and then, of course, I wouldn't miss a game. But when I don't follow them any longer, I don't know all the players, and I'm not that much interested. I'd rather read.
Have there been moments of being First Lady in the White House where they've been difficult for you because you felt that privacy was, people were looking into that privacy or it was being imposed upon?
I think the most difficult task of all is to be so guarded and to be surrounded all the time. You don't have enough what I call blessed aloneness.
A visit with the First Lady will continue after this message.
Not the White House, but the Peruvian embassy in Washington held Mrs. Nixon's proudest moment as First Lady. In June of this year, she received the Grand Cross of the Order of the Sun in recognition of the effort she spurred to aid Peru's 1970 earthquake victims. With a kiss, Peru's First Lady, Mrs. Consuelo Velasco, bestowed her nation's highest award on Mrs. Nixon.
It is a signal honor for me to receive this decoration from the government of Peru. I accept it for the people of the United States who are glad to lend a helping hand to their neighbors in distress, the victims of a terrible earthquake. When Mrs. Velasco and I visited one badly hurt area, I was impressed with her deep concern and compassion for her people. We brought supplies at that time and also brought hope to them. And I'm proud of our people here in this country who love the people of Peru and all the Americas because we truly are one family.
As we talked in the White House 14 months later, I asked the First Lady why she undertook that mission of mercy.
I felt that national and international attention should be focused on the problem of helping these people rebuild their homes after the earthquake. As you know, about 80,000 people died in that quake, but 800,000 were left homeless. And after the first little emergency was over, we didn't read anything more in the papers about it. And yet in my mind, I couldn't get out the tragedy that was there. I'm so glad that I did go because it meant that more people realized the situation there and were willing to help. First of all, we flew into the Capitol, which was not hurt by the quake. But the following day, we took a cargo plane because a large plane could not land in the soccer field, which had been cleared for landing. This plane had no windows, such as most cargo planes do not. So I sat up in front with the pilot and the engineers and the crew members, but there wasn't a chair for me. So they put a little kitchen one in there. And it's the first time I rode without a seat belt and with a chair skidding all over the floor. And when we went over this mountain, I had another second thought. I thought maybe I shouldn't be that wild.
Have you ever been afraid of flying?
I haven't been afraid of flying, but I must say that I could give you some very interesting accounts of what some of our problems have been in flying. For example, one time we lost an engine over the Sahara Desert, and we didn't know whether to try to go ahead for an hour and a half or go back for the same amount of time. Anyway, we turned back and all was well, but it was a long hour and a half.
Do you find that traveling on your own is more difficult? Do you find that you wish sometimes you've worked as a team so much? How do you feel when you're out there alone on one of these trips?
I always go with something in mind, either seeing a project, complimenting the volunteers, or inspecting something in which Dick is interested. And so it doesn't bother me to be alone.
To see what Mrs. Nixon has to face while traveling alone, we followed her on a mid-August cross-country tour. From the First Lady's point of view, it's a matter of routine, covering 5 states in just 3 days, attending ceremonies to mark the return of federal land for use as local parks. This stop in Michigan.
Hi, I'm Miss Battle Creek, and these are for you.
Oh, Holly.
Oh, that's a mistake.
Thanks.
I'm on the National Council. I'm a Michigan representative.
The Monday afternoon airport crowd is a mixture of party faithful and those just plain curious to see the First Lady in person. The trip is billed as non-political, and the welcome at Fort Custer's new recreation area is warmly non-partisan.
I see all these young children here today, and I think of what fun they're going to have here. Boating, enjoying the beauties of this river, camping, hiking, playing baseball. As I saw the group right back here who whistled when I got up. How are you? What position do you play on the team? Well, looky here, honey. Daddy wants to get a picture of you, okay? Now you laugh at Daddy. Smile at him. Come on. Here.
The administration calls this emphasis on recreation its Legacy of Parks program. And the First Lady responds by remembering old skills.
Come on, you get over there and get it.
Get some rum, please. Front.
What? If I know how anymore.
Before departing Washington on this first day of her tour of parklands, the First Lady stopped in suburban McLean, Virginia. The newly created walking trails were packed not with hikers, but with autograph seekers, eager to get a Pat Nixon signature on a program, an envelope, or even on a lunch bag, all to be proudly borne to a place of safekeeping. By Monday evening on this first day, Pat Nixon was having a good time meeting the people.
I think this is so nice. Well, bless your heart. You're all your size. I learn a lot because very often they tell me about a local situation. Apart from that, they'll say such nice things as, tell your husband he's doing a great job, or how are Julie and David? And give our love to Tricia. We saw her on TV. Her wedding was beautiful. And so it makes me relive all the things that have been happening, and I have a lot of news to bring home.
One spectator complimented Mrs. Nixon for inspiring modesty with her style of dress. I asked her if travel affected her wardrobe selection.
No, I decide ahead of a trip and then only pack the things I'm going to need. It isn't that I couldn't take more, but I just don't want the burden of it. And I don't have a personal maid who travels with me because I'm a do-it-yourself person, as you know.
At one point on the trip, a do-it-yourself news conference began when the First Lady left her cabin to drop in on the reporters sharing her Air Force jet. Mrs. Nixon remarking that women could do a lot for politics and that she'd gladly campaign for qualified women. Asked about the militant National Women's Political Caucus, Mrs. Nixon replied, I haven't read too much about that. It sounds pretty wild to me. At the third stop on her tour, she ran into militants of a different sort. It was Tuesday morning, Fort Snelling, Minnesota, and the First Lady is surprised but unruffled by a half-dozen shouting Indians.
I thank you very much for your friendly welcome today. I've been looking forward to coming to Fort Snelling for this exciting ceremony when the federal government... Well, we have a few friends here. Thank you for coming. Anyway, we were very proud to turn over this federal property to the state of Minnesota. I have visions of all the people through the years who will enjoy these historic buildings, the fort which meant so much in the development of the Northwest. I am now happy and proud to present the certificate to the state of Minnesota.
The crowd's warm applause silenced the hecklers, and the First Lady minimized the incident.
Apparently, they were Indians who were protesting the giving back of the property to the state, which means, of course, to the state they can enjoy it as well as any other citizen. But apparently, the history tells us that at the time that this property was acquired by the military, two tribes were fighting over it. And this was a losing tribe. So I don't think they had very much to stand on. And I do hope those people will be able to enjoy that park.
Mrs. Nixon enjoyed the park herself, even to the point of rolling in a few putts, all under the critical eye of the local caddies. Fort Snelling is an old cavalry post whose parade ground still rings with the shouts and clicks of polo matches.
And a mallet from the Twin City Polo Club.
Oh, my goodness, how marvelous. And we wish you good luck.
Thank you.
It really was a thrill to see you match. You know, I'm going to be able to, really. Maybe I ought to have this for a golf ball. You know, it's easier to hit. I'm going to be able to start a recreation center. Where's your bowling ball? I have one with my name on it. Have you played lately?
Johnson.
I can never get my husband away from work to have a partner, and it's not fun to play alone. And now since Julie's gone, I don't have a partner. I used to play with David sometimes, or Julie, or sometimes all together.
Have you horseback ridden, Miss Nixon?
Oh, I grew up on a farm. I can ride any kind of a horse.
Just a demonstration.
Well, I showed you how I could do the volleyball yesterday. Now, if they'd loaned me a horse, can we borrow a horse and a Secret Service agent to hold him?
Among the little leaguers, Pat Nixon discovers an idol of her husband's, baseball slugger Harmon Killebrew.
Well, hello. So glad to be here with you. I think you're marvelous. You take these youngsters on and give them a spirit of inspiration. And my husband called up David. You know, David's such a fan. And he was down in Florida, and he was talking about, let's see, that was just last week, but you've really been hitting them, you know. And he said, what do you know? You know.
Tuesday afternoon, only the second day, but the fourth stop on the cross-country tour. Near Medford, Oregon, the Camp White National Guard installation is to lose 400 acres for a local park. Climbing aboard a covered wagon is easy.
Oh, we're all going to walk along.
Let's go, Mom. Let's go.
Emerging next to the driver is not so easy. But the 59-year-old First Lady displays youthful agility. Agility that is the envy of many onlookers. The qualities of America's early pioneers are highly prized by Pat Nixon. One of her major interests is the promotion of citizens' programs for giving volunteer service to the community. In her view, people helping people can accomplish miracles.
I think of our pioneer days here in this country when people banded together to help each other. For example, they built the houses, cleared the roads, built the schools, churches, fire departments, museums. And I think that they accomplished so much in those days that if we had a revival of that type of work, we could erase all the ills from our country.
Mrs. Nixon, they're going to have a skydiving demonstration next. I believe they're about ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
The skydivers proved to be more accurate than the Secret Service finds comfortable.
Watch it!
They heard of him.
We're very
How
proud
many do you have all together?
to be near you. We're about 30 in the club now.
Oh, isn't this going to be a great spot for you?
Yes.
Then the farmers won't get after you any longer for landing on you.
She knows.
Wednesday, the trip's final stop, Border Field, where Mexico and California meet the Pacific Ocean. A fence separates the good neighbors, south and north of the border, and the First Lady is disturbed by it. Even as she concludes the ceremonies, Pat Nixon has plans for that fence. It must come down.
Fine.
Good to see you. I'm going to come around. We don't want to get offended.
I asked Mrs. Nixon how her unscheduled excursion into Mexico came about.
It came about in an interesting way. The mayor of Tijuana was seated next to me and said, someday I'd like you to visit. And I said, well, how about today? So he said, oh, I think we can arrange that. Then when I got into the crowd, I couldn't find him, so I said to one of our aides, please go get the mayor. So he came running and pulled down the fence so that I could greet the people on both sides. As I said then, I do hope that this will be a common beach because we're such good friends with Mexico. I don't think we need a border.
The border ends at water's edge, where the distinctly American surfers begin.
Hi there. How are you? Having fun?
Yeah.
Is this a good surfing beach?
No, it's still up and down.
Oh. Come up to San Clemente.
Yeah, so
That's
hope
better.
you get that surfing park in.
Yeah,
All
that's it.
That is
And already
good.
some of them are using it all along our
Yeah, but you
place
get
there.
shot at once in a while.
Oh, no, you don't. My husband ordered that you could use it anytime you wanted to.
All right.
Yeah.
This weekend.
In fact, we even have a surfboard that the girls gave him, our daughters gave him. And he doesn't know the sport, so he said he was going to let people use his. So we'll see you there.
Her legacy of parks trip completed, it was home to San Clemente. I wondered if the First Lady would report to the President on the mood of the people she'd encountered on her trip.
I often say I'm his eyes and ears, but anyway, he's very interested to have me report. And he's always very proud of the things that I do, which makes them all the more worthwhile.
A visit with the First Lady continues at the Western White House when we resume following station identification.
Top flight reporting and commentary, the ABC Evening News with Howard K. Smith and Harry Reasoner.
Our visit with the First Lady continued at the Nixon home in San Clemente. A pool and a 3-hole golf course border the rambling Spanish house. The President's office is at the nearby Coast Guard station. And Mrs. Nixon and the staff sometimes find unexpected guests for luncheon. One always welcome guest is the Nixons' daughter, Julie Eisenhower, who was cautious in comparing her mother with previous First Ladies.
You can't really compare First Ladies. I think that the times dictate what a First Lady will be like, and also the job, how she interprets the job. But I think my mother's interpreting it the way that's good for her. She's not trying to change herself. In other words, she's always preferred to stay more in the background, and yet her presence is felt. And she is just doing the most she can for people and working with people in a quiet way. And I respect her for not, trying to be made into a certain image or become an Eleanor Roosevelt or someone else. She's just being herself.
To Pat Nixon, just being herself includes relaxing in the patio of her hacienda-style home, where she's comfortable in a casual pantsuit. We chatted about her problems in choosing a wardrobe.
I try to go to the stores whenever possible because I think it's fun to go in and have a chance to see what's available. However, I find that I don't have too much time to shop, so I shop each season. Clothes are brought to me at a hotel in New York by a buyer, who then acts like a retailer and takes the markup. So I do choose designers, American designers, because I think they're the best in the world.
Do you ever go for any of the Parisian designers or the Italian designers?
No, I stick to our Americans. I think that they deserve a great deal of credit. Their clothes are always so well constructed. They're not too expensive. They do last, and they are now using so many materials which are great for traveling because they're non-crushable.
What about the number of things that you have? Do you have to pack a lot when you go on a trip? You've been on trips across the country, and what about your longest trip? How long was it?
The longest trip was in 1953. It was 72 days, and we dressed for dinner every night except one. That was a chore because during the day I would be out seeing the people in all walks of life at the schools, the hospitals, the orphanages, the homes for the aged and all. And then we would return and hastily dress to meet kings and queens, and this was quite a transition.
How many dresses or how many outfits did you take along for 72 days?
You won't believe it. 6 evening dresses.
That's all?
Of evening, yes. I took daytime dresses as well, but I felt that each country was different and I could rewear things. And I think it's a burden to pack too heavily because you have to take care of these clothes. And unpacking and repacking is a job.
I'd like to talk to you for a moment about this house. It's just a lovely place. And you found it about how long ago?
About 2.5 years ago. However, the house has stood for 40 years and has a lot of history behind it. This place was once called Cypress Point because of the cypress trees you see here. And all of the trees date back at least to the time that the house was built, and many far beyond that time.
When did you decide that you liked this house, or how did you actually find it?
We wanted a place on the ocean, which both of us enjoy so much. And a mutual friend found this house. So Dick, without telling me what he was thinking about, had me come for a weekend just to look at it. And he had Tricia come too, so she could help sell me.
How did you feel? Did you fall in love with the house?
I did, right the moment I saw it. It needed a lot of work inside because it had been unused. And I think maybe Dick felt that I would just look at the inside, but I really didn't. I looked at the trees and garden, and I knew a little paint would fix everything inside.
And of course, that fabulous view that you have from so many places of the ocean out there.
It's beautiful at all times of the day. For example, early in the morning, we see the surfers out having a good time. And that's very interesting because they start at 6 o'clock in the morning when the tide is heavy. My passion is gardening.
You love flowers. What is your very favorite flower? Do you have one?
I like the little marguerite, which is a form of daisy, either in the white, and it comes in yellow and pink. So any color is fine, just so it's a marguerite.
This place where we're sitting is a very special place to you, I understand. This inside, secluded patio. Why do you feel it's so special?
At the present time, it's the only place in the world where we can sit unguarded. There may be a few people outside, but we don't see them. So when we come in here, it's just heaven without anybody around.
What about the life here compared to the life in Washington, where, of course, you were still the official First Lady and the President is here, but it's more of a relaxed life. Can you also go out? Supposing you and the President decide to go to a Mexican restaurant and have dinner, is it easier out here?
I think it is easier because people aren't expecting to see us, so they don't gather at the restaurant ahead of time. However, before we leave the restaurant, they have gathered.
Do you do that very often? Do you go out to dinner here?
We do about, 2-3 times while we're here because it's a nice change pace.
What are some of the favorite things that you do around this Western White House? Do you read much out here?
In fact, this is the only place I have a chance to read because in Washington I just read reports, but not fiction, and I do like historical novels and other books. The girls always bring me a favorite book they've recently read. So already Julie brought me 4, and Tricia says when she comes in a week or so, she's going to bring me some others.
Let's talk about your youth. When you were growing up out here in California, did you have a happy home, a happy childhood?
Yes, we did. All of us had to contribute to the family by helping. But we had many good times together. For example, I can remember in the evenings when we would play like Run, Sheep, Run and all the games familiar to you, too. But we certainly didn't feel that we were put upon to do some work. In fact, it was a challenge. All of our friends did the same type of thing, so I just feel that even today, if the young people had more work, they would not get into as much trouble.
You had more than your share of it shortly in your life. I think you were in high school. Your mother died rather early, and then you had to take care of your father, and you were on your own. Did you kind of take care of the family?
I did. But it was a pleasure because we all worked together, and like my brothers, I would help with the dishes. Of course, they'd pull the curtain so no one could see this happening naturally because they were great big athletes. But anyway, They were very protective of me and kind to me, so it was fun. And when they went to college, we always had their friends come home, and I'd cook for the friends and do some of the shirts for the young men who couldn't afford to have them done.
We got to college, while you were in high school, did you decide what you wanted to do when you went to college, what you wanted to become?
I hadn't decided exactly, except that I knew I wanted an education. I didn't want to marry early or try to go up without the education which I felt was necessary. I stayed out of college 3 years, but finally finished. During those 3 years I stayed out of college, I was making expenses to return.
Didn't you once have a job in the movies?
Yes, I did.
To a college girl, didn't it seem glamorous being a movie extra?
Well, some would call it glamorous. I thought it was great because I earned extra money, but I would often go to find myself, and I would have to hunt very hard.
What was the movie, Becky Sharp? I think you played a small part in that.
Yes.
Do you remember who was in that movie?
Miriam Hopkins. It was a long time ago. But I also was in Small Town Girl and Ben-Hur and various other ones. However, it isn't as glamorous as it sounds because you sit for one take and it goes on and on and on. And maybe all day long you've only accomplished 3 so-called scenes.
Did you ever think of becoming a movie actress?
No, I didn't, because I keep saying that I wanted an education. And I was offered a small part, but I decided not to drop out of school.
And when you graduated, you were a teacher, right? At Whittier High School?
Right.
And you also did some extracurricular activity, and didn't you direct plays and then start working in the theater, too?
We did have a lot of fun. I was in charge of what was called the PEP committee, which put on the plays, stunts between halves at the games, marching units, and I'd get up there and work with the yell leaders and song leaders. It was loads of fun.
Then you were cast in a show opposite a young man, a young lawyer. What was his name?
Well, Dick.
Dick. Was his last name Nixon by any chance?
Yes.
And that's when you first met Richard Nixon, when you were...
That's true. I was a young teacher in Whittier, his hometown. At that time, the teachers were expected to take part in community activities, and one of them was the theater there. So I had taken a part, and Dick heard that there was a new school teacher in town, so he thought he'd come down and take a look, and then he also took a part. So that's how we met.
Then you started going together. Did you ever think at that time, when you first met him and started going out with him, that you would marry him and perhaps he would become a very famous man sometime?
I knew he'd be famous because already he was quite famous in his town even, because he was the youngest member of the Board of Trustees at the college. He was also Assistant Attorney General and interested in various service clubs where he held officership.
How long did you know the president, or Richard Nixon as he was then, before you decided, yes, this was the man for you, that you wanted to marry him?
It was 2.5 years before we were married, but we both knew we were in love before that.
You've answered questions for me at the White House and here at San Clemente. Would you like an opportunity now to bury any myths that you see written about you that make you smile or frown, that you consider are really untrue?
Yes, I do, from time to time, have a good laugh over the fact that I'm supposed to be shy. After all, I've been traveling all over the world for 20 years, and I haven't had any problem making friends, which are still friends today. I hear from many people that I've met in different parts of the world. And also, having met so many of the leaders who now come to visit our country or we go to visit theirs, is a very important aspect of the life I've had, because we immediately get off on a easy basis and remark about the last time we met and have a lot of fun talking, and I understand their country and they understand our country, and so it is anything but being shy.
President Nixon chats with Virginia Sherwood when a visit with the First Lady continues.
The man who lives here is interested in history, where civilization is going, the great things men have done in the past. But his interest is not just scholarly. When it comes to 20th century history, he's been in the middle of it. He was there with the leaders at historic moments of World War II. He was there in 1960 as a moderator of the Kennedy-Nixon debates. His profession and his stature in that profession have kept him at the side of the great men of the world. In 30 years as a working newsman, he's won every major award in the field of broadcast journalism. The man who lives here knows a lot about what's going on in the world. And he knows how to share what he knows with you. He's Howard K. Smith, newsman, co-anchorman on the ABC Evening News.
Greetings! It's Fruit Pie the magician!
Where?
I don't see him. Look!
Hostess fruit pies, that is. To kids, I'm just as real as the real fruit flavor of Hostess fruit pies.
Here, Dad. You see him yet?
Almost. Hostess fruit pies, Twinkies and cupcakes. With Hostess, tasting is believing.
Talking about his wife is a topic the president obviously enjoys. He started by trying to define Mrs. Nixon's finest quality as First Lady.
It's hard to pick one thing out of all the others, I guess. I think perhaps the fact that she always maintains her poise. It's very difficult for anybody in public life to be in the public eye all the time and to maintain poise, character, to be an example, so to speak. I know there is a theory that it's a good idea not to try to be quite, shall we say so, correct, and some say stiff. But on the other hand, I think particularly where the presidency is involved and the First Lady is involved, there is a responsibility. Whenever an appearance is made, either informally or formally, to act as people, particularly the parents of young children, think a president ought to act or a First Lady ought to act. And I must say that in the time that Mrs. Nixon has been First Lady, and when she was also the wife of the Vice President, when I was Vice President, that I don't think there was ever a moment when she was not the First Lady in her public appearances. I think this is very important. It's not only the quality of poise, but she's very impressive in another respect. Enormous stamina. I've always said that. I've often said, and then they say, which is the stronger of the two sexes? There's no question about it. Physically, and I run a pretty fast pace, but physically the woman is stronger than the man. She can take more. She can, for example, when we do have receiving lines, I have a tendency after 1,000 to get a little dizzy. She never gets dizzy. That just shows you.
Mrs. Nixon was a teacher. How would you grade her as a campaigner? Is she an A campaigner, first rate?
Well, if I didn't think so, I wouldn't say anything else. No, I'd give her an A, and I'm a pretty stiff grader, too, as a campaigner. Now, she's a very effective campaigner, and particularly effective in terms of making each individual she meets feel for that one precious moment that that person is the only person in the world. You know, there are different ways that you can shake hands with people. You can go down the fence at an airport, and you just do it automatically, you know, bang, 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 and say, well, I shook hands with 500. It's more important to make one individual feel that he or she, for that moment, has met the president or the First Lady than it is just to do it in the mass. And Mrs. Nixon is extremely effective that way. She's warm-hearted, and she's very thoughtful. I've seen it on our first trip around the world when we traveled 73 days as vice president to so many countries. While I was in meetings, she worked 12, 14 hours a day, going to hospitals. She even went to a leper colony. She was the first individual who had ever visited this leper colony, celebrity so-called, and shook hands with those who were at the leper colony. That sort of thing had a dramatic impact in creating understanding and goodwill.
After the presidency, sir, what do you wish perhaps for the First Lady and even for yourself? What kind of life?
Well, what she wants, I'm rather sure, is, of course, the exact opposite of what we've been discussing. I don't mean that she doesn't like what she does and that she doesn't do it very well. Of course, I'm a little prejudiced on both counts. But I think that what she wants, and I think this is true of almost any woman, is privacy. You know, there are times when a woman doesn't want to have her hair fixed, have to think, well, now I can't go out wearing slacks today because that wouldn't be First Lady-like or something like that. But where, in effect, she can let her hair down, walk along the beach, not worry about a camera being off or some reporter being up there taking a look and saying, I looked at him and that's didn't look very ladylike to me or something like that. Maybe kick up her heels. I think above everything else, the sense of privacy is what any individual in public life misses. It's particularly true of women. See, the man is different. The man is out there in the arena. He's fighting. He's battling. And consequently, he isn't worried so much, isn't so concerned about the fact that he is denied the chance just to be himself. He expects it. But for the woman, it's something else again. She realizes that public life interferes with her ability to live her life, you know, as a wife, as a mother. So I would say that of all the things that she would like to do, perhaps it would be to walk the beach, walk it without any cameras, without anybody looking on, figuring she could do just what she wanted.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Is the First Lady waiting for that walk now, do you think?
I understand out of the corner of my eye that she might be.
I guess we better get ready.
Perhaps we'll go over and if the camera wants to look in, I won't mind a bit. No, I'll tell her that this is one time she can just assume that she can wear what she wants. In terms of a First Lady or the wife of any man in public life, one of her major responsibilities is to provide some relief from the rather heavy responsibilities that the man has. If you can change the pace and talk about things that are very important, family matters, for example, and what somebody said who happened to come through the White House, which was maybe funny or maybe moving, something of that sort. That really helps the president, whoever he is, get through the next day a little better.
A Visit with the First Lady with correspondent Virginia Sherwood is a presentation of ABC News.